when I was at the worst place I was with my health a couple of years ago, I felt the best about my life because I realized that what I needed so badly was control and consistency. And I understood that I wasn't going to get that with the way that my health was. Like, things were changing and I was reacting to new things and I was trying different medications, and that was out of my control. So I gave myself control by building systems and routines and habits in my life that were as simple as, like, waking up at a certain time every day, going to the gym in the morning, always going for a walk before I had breakfast, whether the walk was 1 mile because that's all I could do that day, or it was 3 miles, reading before I go to bed. It's these things that allow me to give myself that control because I realized that that is what I needed. That is what my brain needed. That's what my body needed. And it looked different to what I expected. I expected that to be in the other ways of my health, but I realized I wasn't going to get that. And that first step is probably the hardest, is realizing and admitting that you're not going to get it in that way and giving it to yourself in another way.
Welcome to the Delta Podcast. I'm your host, Coach Coale. This is the show where we dive into the relationship between leadership and change, what it means for individuals, teams, and organizations looking to thrive. Today's a great day to be coachable, so let's jump in. Jenna, my friend, it's great to see you.
It's great to see you too.
Welcome into the Delta. How are you? You're in Los Angeles these days, is that right?
I am in LA. It's great.
Well, you and I connected years ago during my LA days, and I'm grateful for a chance to reconnect with you here on the Delta. You know, on this podcast, we talk about leadership and change, the relationship between those things, and what it means for individuals and teams and organizations looking to optimize. So we'll use a few questions to launch here in a second, but I want to give you a proper introduction and just say that one of the things that I love about your version of entrepreneurship and what you're doing in the world is you experience, you'll talk more about this, I hope. You have this medical condition, MCAS, and you were experiencing it a while ago, experiencing these symptoms, and you talk about it as a pretty isolating experience. Instead of staying in that isolation, you went in the opposite direction and you went public about it on social media, and all sorts of good has come for you and for countless other people in the world, around the world, because you chose to speak up about something that you were experiencing. And I find being an entrepreneur takes a lot of courage. Being an entrepreneur in the way that you're doing it takes even more. So I'm thrilled to be here. And that's what I love about what you're doing. Tell me about what you love about your work these days.
I think my work really came from a lot of things. It was this idea that I really just wanted to find the thing that I was passionate about, the thing that I could put all my energy into, all my free time, do all the time, that I really loved. And I always knew I had a passion for health and healthcare, and working in healthcare in high school, I realized, like, this is what I want to do. I want to improve healthcare. I want to improve the experience of healthcare. And it was just all about figuring out where that fell. And like you said, I had these challenges with my health, and a lot of people assume that that is what got me into working in healthcare, but it's actually not, because I was already doing that before. And I think that having my experience working in the healthcare industry has just given me even more knowledge and even more experience that has helped me then approach sharing my personal health journey on social media in the way that I've done it, and being successful in doing that in the way that I've done it. But truly, for me, it is about how can we make the experience of healthcare better for people. And that means people, meaning patients, that means consumers, and that means also the people working in the industry as well.
Amazing. So let me make sure that I got this. So before you were diagnosed with Mast Cell Activation Syndrome, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
You were interested in the healthcare industry before.
Yeah, I've always loved health and biology and science like that, but I honestly dismissed it for the longest time because I thought the only job in healthcare was being a provider, being a doctor, being a nurse. And I knew that wasn't what I wanted to do. I didn't want to have a clinical job where I was seeing patients. And so I dismissed it. I thought, this is not my calling then. Like, this isn't the path for me. And it wasn't until I got an internship in high school where I got the opportunity to go and work at a big hospital in an innovation incubator, where I actually got to see there's this whole other side of healthcare with startups and these companies that are innovating and creating solutions on so many different fronts. Like some solutions are for the operating room, some are direct to patients, some are for providers, some are as simple as like scheduling nurses. There's so many solutions and there's so many areas that you can innovate in healthcare that doesn't involve being a clinical provider.
I'm going to ask you a follow-up here. I've heard you talk a bunch about healthcare, the world of healthcare. And oftentimes when you use the word healthcare, you talk about experience. Tell me about those two words. Why is it important to put them together?
So the first thing I want to say is that I mostly spell healthcare as two words. And there is a reason for that.
Okay.
Because we are taking care of our health.
Yeah.
I think the word healthcare as one word is very like industry specific. It's like the healthcare industry, but I don't think that encompasses everything that comes with the experience of healthcare. Healthcare is part of our daily life. And I think in the nature that healthcare as an industry has gone in the past couple of decades, and I think we're starting to improve on the other end, but by creating such clinical, and I mean clinical in the sense of like very structured, very siloed and fragmented services and experiences, we have made this environment where people feel like going to the doctor, taking care of their health, getting a medication is like a step out of their daily life and a negative and like a pull down and something weighing them down that they don't want to do. They feel like they have to do, is a burden, is a negative. Oh, if I go to the doctor, that means something bad's going to happen. People have separated it from their daily life. And I think with my personal experiences and having to being sort of forced to have it be more part of my daily life because I was seeing doctors so frequently and constantly doing all these different things has made me realize like actually it should be part of everybody's everyday life. And that doesn't mean going to the doctor every day, but it means the small things you're doing, like what you eat, movement that you get, like fitness, exercise, sleep, everything affects your health. So everything is healthcare.
Yeah. I like the reframe there. And you're advocating, if I understand you correctly, for bringing that more into our daily life in terms of how we think about what we eat, our sleep. I like that you called out movement as a core value of mine. Why do you think, well, from your experience, how has that made your life different, bringing the healthcare piece more into the daily?
I think it's allowed me to feel like that part of me and the challenges that I face and the things that I have to go out of my way to do that maybe other people don't have to do is less of something that I have to hide. You know, I think especially when it comes to invisible conditions um and things like that, it's very different from, you know, if somebody breaks their arm and they have a cast on, it's normalized to talk about it. Like it's okay to go around being like, yeah, I fell off a tree and broke my arm, right? Like that's considered funny, silly. We can talk about it, but the second, you know, or at least I felt like this in the past, the second I would be like, oh yeah, you know, I have this condition where I have like allergic like reactions to all of these things and it makes my life really difficult. People are like, why are we talking about this? Like, what is this about? Why do I need to know this? But the second you have like a, you know, even with a condition like that, the second something is visible to somebody else, and I think this is, you know, people selfishly are curious. They want to know. Like that's how, you know, people when you see something different, we want to know what it's about. We're curious people as human beings.
Yes.
And I think it's perfectly fine to be curious and to ask questions, and I'm always willing to share, but it's like the attitude towards that type of sharing, especially when people don't ask for it, is very different.
Should we get into the conversation?
Let's do it.
Okay. I don't know what you're bringing in here, by the way. I just want to go on record and say, you got the question. So what should we talk about today? Why should we talk about this now? And what does success in this conversation look like? One of my favorite things is co-creating the conversation, especially when I don't know where we're going to start. So let's begin with the first question here, Jenna. What would you like to talk about with the time that you and I got?
Well, you're obviously very good at your job, or you're just like psychic or something, because even though what I want to talk about might not sound like it's related to what we just talked about, it definitely is. But I wanted to talk about, you know, so much of my life and the way that I've been able to approach my life and why I feel like people interpret that I am so positive about my situation and my life and just healthcare in general as well. Like I'm definitely what you might call a healthcare optimist.
Mm.
is I want to talk about what healing really means, like what the idea of healing means, and how a lot of people think of it as a result and an endpoint, but really it's a relationship.
Mm.
And in a way of what we were just talking about, it's an experience. Healing is an experience. It is not an end result. It is not something we are trying to reach. Yeah.
I love this. Healing is an experience. Okay, you say more about that. How would you define, or what's your working definition of healing?
Well, I think the definition of healing, um, and what society and people think it is that there's a lot of societal pressure to find the fix. So you're
Right.
healing from an illness. That means you're getting better and you're fixing it. And I think with chronic conditions, there's also that pressure to do that. And when there's no cure, it's not that there's a fix, but there's how do we get to the best possible point with the medications, the treatments, the knowledge, whatever we have in society.
Mm.
And I think that gets us into this cycle of constantly trying to get to the end point and doing everything we can right now to try and get there and putting all of our energy. And then I think there's this idea that if we're not doing that, if we're not actively trying the next medication, trying the next treatment, trying to do the next thing, then we're somehow like, people are like, well, why aren't you doing that? So you hate your life, so you don't want to get better, so you don't. And it's like, no, time is going to go by either way, and
Yeah.
it takes a lot of energy to do those things, and that energy could be used doing something else, and it's perfectly fine to be where you are right now and be very happy with where you are and still hope that in the future you might be somewhere else.
I love this definition of healing, and you're challenging the notion that it's healing as an endpoint. I mean, I think I'm guilty of this. Last time I was sick, somebody asked me, "How am I feeling?" I'm sure I said something like, like 70%." What that implies is that there is a 100% that I'm moving closer to, and that when I hit that point, um, I'm healed.
Yeah,
You're offering a different perspective.
yeah, and it's interesting. I think somebody asked me something like this morning, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but people sometimes ask the question of like, if I'm happy with where I'm at, or if I'm like, they don't usually say like cured or, whatever that type of term, but it's more like asking me if I'm happy with where I'm at. And my instinct is to say yes, because I am happy, like I am content. But then I second guess that answer because I assume that they then assume that there's nothing wrong.
Mm.
And it's like hard to accept that both things can be true at the same
Yeah.
time, that I can be very happy with where I'm at now. For anybody who doesn't know, I can only eat 14 foods because I have like allergic like reactions to every other food, and that's part of the condition I have. Um I'm very happy with my foods. Like I like my foods that I eat every day.
Mm.
I've figured out ways to adapt my life so that some of the things that I found extremely difficult before are less difficult. But that's not to say they aren't still difficult. That's not to say there aren't still things that I can't do because of that. There aren't. It's not to say that I still don't have a lot of fear and anxiety around doing things that I know other people can just do without even a second thought. And so that's not to say that in the future, I don't hope that I don't have those challenges. But at the same time, I am happy with where I'm at now. And I'm very happy with how I'm approaching my life and where I'm taking it.
Mm. You could be both of those things simultaneously. I don't want to jump on the next question too soon. Do you want to take a minute to talk about mast cell activation syndrome for folks that don't know anything about that?
Sure, I'll just very briefly describe it. Like you mentioned, I share a lot about this on social media, so people can always go over there and learn more. But essentially, you have these cells that are a type of white blood cell called mast cells. And one of the many things they are responsible for in your immune system is releasing mediators in response to threats. And those threats are typically allergens. So for most people, I feel like the most common knowledge around this is histamine.
Mm.
You take antihistamines if you have allergies. Histamine is one of hundreds of mediators that gets released from mast cells in a process called degranulation. So you imagine like it's a bubble, and the bubble opens and the histamine and the other mediators come out. And then those mediators cause symptoms by binding into different tissues in your body. Now, mast cells are located everywhere in your
All
body,
over your body.
all over in every system of the body, which means that the symptoms that degranulation can cause can truly be anything. And that is one reason why it is so hard to diagnose and treat mast cell conditions, is because they affect so many different systems of the body. And with that, it can be so different for different people. And unlike a typical allergy, which when people say allergies, most people think of IgE mediated allergies. Um, those kinds of allergies are very specific, and that's what typically causes, what people think of, like, you go to the doctor and you get your skin prick test and you react to it, and then if you ate that food, you might have anaphylaxis. But with a mast cell condition, the reactions can vary so much in not only symptoms, but also in severity. And so it makes it very complicated. And those reactions can change over time as well. And so I developed all of the ones I have, and they change. And sometimes I react to something, sometimes I don't. Sometimes, there have been specific times where I haven't reacted to a food and all of a sudden I do. You can also not only react to foods, but you can react to fragrances. You can react to temperature changes. You can react to pressure changes. Really anything that can affect the body. It's like your mast cells are, well, they're dysfunctional. They're interpreting things that should not be threats as a threat.
It sounds pretty complicated.
It is.
So you mentioned 14 foods you can eat. Yeah, how long have you had this diagnosis, and how long has it taken to get up to 14 foods?
So, well, sort of the opposite, but
Oh,
we can trace that I have had this condition since the day I was born.
okay.
The seemingly random health issues I've had my entire life are all explained by this. But it didn't get worse until I was about 13 and in middle school. And I didn't get diagnosed till I was 18. It took about 18 months from when I figured out about the condition and thought this might be something I have to actually get a formal diagnosis. But because the testing can be quite complicated. But I got diagnosed when I was 18, and I used to be able to eat every food. I had no allergies, and I developed them over time as the condition got worse. But at the lowest point, I could only eat 9 foods. And so with some treatments and various things, I've been able to go back up to 14.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. It sounds, listening to you describe the things that could um, cause you to have an allergic reaction, like there's a combination of things I would imagine that you have some influence or control over, but there's a whole lot of things that are just out in the world that
Yeah,
could trigger this.
it is. And that's what makes it scary, and that's what makes it unpredictable and very complicated.
Yeah. It sounds those things for sure. I want to go back to the topic healthcare, and we talk about healing. So Jenna, with the time that we got, of all the things that you and I could jam about, why is this a topic that you want to double click on?
Well, I think a few reasons. One, it's definitely central to a lot of the things I talk about. I think, it's easy to go online, and some of my most viral content is like me starting out, like, I can only eat 14 foods and I'm going to try and make whatever. Like, I love doing recipe experiments. And it's great to talk about those things. It's great to talk about, even in my work, like problems we have in healthcare. But ultimately, like, yes, we are trying to solve a thing, or we're trying to label. There are so many labels and words we use, but all people really want is to be happy, right? That's like a big thing. And I think healing is like one of those ways that we get to that happiness state. And I think right now we live in a world that is so obsessed with this idea of optimization, especially when it comes to health. And we've talked about that a little bit. And to me, I don't like the word optimization, because to me it means this reaching of like a perfect state of perfection. How do we get to that point? And I think we often forget that the most important thing in life is the relationships we have with people, is connection, and is like being in relationship with ourselves, with our lives, with the work we do, with really everything. And I'd like to replace the word of optimization with prioritization, because when we
Good.
think about our health, for example, optimization is like an endpoint.
Yep.
And I feel like we can be so focused on trying to get to that optimized state that we like put everything else aside. And when you get to that optimized state, if you've sacrificed your mental health and physical health in order to get there, then
Or
what do you have? You have
relationships.
nothing. Yeah. It's like,
Yeah.
when people go so hard to get to a goal and then they're burnt out, how you got to your end
Yeah.
goal, but now you're too burnt out to enjoy it. Whereas prioritization is more active.
Yeah.
It's like, how can we do that in the present moment, in every present moment? Like, prioritize yourself, prioritize your health, so that eventually, yes, you are improving, but you're also still stable and you're also still fine.
Yes. How did you arrive at this thinking about prioritization, optimization? Is this something that you've been kicking around for a while?
Yeah, it is. And it actually started with, I don't like to hate on people, but Brian Johnson, I think a lot of the stuff he does is like a little bit ridiculous. And I personally don't believe in the
Uh,
philosophy. I don't think he looks that healthy.
mm,
His life doesn't sound that great. Like, what, he spends like 22 hours of the day so focused on what? Trying to live longer, but then are you not living now? So then when you
mm,
eventually live longer, you've spent all this time not living. So then have you really actually lived longer? And that's actually what got me
yeah.
thinking about it, is I saw him speak in person and I was like,
Mm,
is this really the life? Like,
yeah.
what's the point?
Yes. The word that's coming back around for me is experience that you mentioned earlier. Like,
Mhm.
what's the experience we're having with ourselves, with other people? I want to continue with the prioritization point and ask you the third question here is what should we aim for in the conversation that we get to have?
I think just to explore these topics and these ideas. And, like I just said, one of the most important things in life is relationships. And I think the core of any relationship, like how you build a relationship, how you maintain a relationship, is communication. And that can even be with yourself. Like, the way that we communicate, and that doesn't just mean words, the way that we communicate, the language that we use, whether that's words, whether that's like actions, whatever it is, like that's how we are in relationship with the world. That's every transaction in the world is a form of communication.
Mm,
And I think that's why it's so important to just like exchange thoughts with people. We can have these thoughts on our own and we can think about these things, but thinking about it with other people is, it could change someone's life. Like, so many of my revelations I've had, and these little changes that have led to huge changes in my life, have literally just been like a sentence that has just popped into my head that has changed the entire way I think
mm,
about something. And sometimes that can happen by you talking to somebody, or it can be by somebody hearing something. And so I hope that anybody who is listening to this either feels more seen by me,
mm.
by themselves because it helped them think of something, or by you, so that they can then go out and live their life, and not that let their life like live them. You know how people
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
like, wear the outfit, don't let the outfit live wear you? Same thing with your life.
I like that. I appreciate that metaphor. Well, and you and I, in a conversation we had recently, we were going back and forth about optimization because I was telling you about some of the work that I was doing, and you were like, "Well, here's the problem I have with that word," which was great because I agree with you. Um, I think back in my teaching days, I used to talk about the idea of like a text is meant to be read in conversation. If we're reading a book, it's meant to be read in conversation because I read the book, I have my context, my life experience, and it's framing how I'm thinking about some of the things. You have a different set of those things. And so it may shape your meaning of the thing that you're reading, and we come together and we arrive at a deeper understanding, more creative interpretation, a more full interpretation of the text. And so, if I'm hearing you correctly, that's what success. That's what success in this conversation looks like. It's just you and I going back and forth in dialogue over
Mhm.
some of these ideas.
Yeah.
Okay, so where would you like to begin?
I think maybe going back to sort of what we were talking about at the beginning, and I thought of this, and I think it comes back to healing and the idea of relationship. So I gave like a little talk last year at USC, and the topic was how creativity is what I believe is truly the key to changing healthcare. And the reason why, and hopefully I don't lose people with this, because it is a little bit abstract. But we have healthcare and we have medicine. And to me, medicine is the science, it's the medications, it's the machines, it's the devices, it's like the scientific facts. And then we have healthcare, and healthcare is the experience. And I think the reason why people feel quite negatively often around healthcare is because they actually feel negatively aware against towards the medicine and the way that the medicine is being presented to them.
What do you mean?
Well, oftentimes the way that services in healthcare are, it's not very personal.
Yeah.
People feel rushed in doctor's appointments. They feel confused by information. They don't feel empowered. They feel like they feel like they're being taken advantage of. Maybe they feel like they don't understand why they need to do something. Maybe they feel like they've been wronged in some way.
Yeah.
And ultimately that doesn't really have to do with the medicine itself. It has to do with the way that it's being presented to them. So in my mind, like the ideal is that people enjoy healthcare and that healthcare is a pleasant experience and that the problem isn't with the medicine. And I think so much of innovation and so many companies are trying to innovate the medicine when really we need to innovate the healthcare and the
Yeah.
experience. And that might mean, there are so many fragmented and siloed solutions. We don't need more solutions. We need more ways of bridging the gaps. And I truly believe that creativity is the bridge between medicine and healthcare.
This is
So
a cool idea.
creativity and design and creating that experience is actually the bridge between the medicine, the science, all of those things, and like the experience in people's lives. And that in and of itself is a relationship that we are building.
So but what's coming to mind is I'm hearing you the like there's a thing we build, there's a product, and that might be really great. Like it's super innovative and it's exactly the sort of treatment that's targeted to the thing that's going wrong for this individual. And yet, if I'm the healthcare provider and I just say, if I don't deliver it well, if I'm short, if there's no bedside manner, if there is no empathy, or if I'm communicating, Jenna Gestetner, you need to take this medication in this way, it doesn't matter how good the medicine is. My experience is going to be a crap one because you, uh, on the receiving end of this, don't feel seen, don't feel heard. None of your maybe deeper concerns are addressed. Am I hearing you correctly that that's and the bridge between those things is let's think about it more creatively, like a designer?
100%. I think obviously science is very important and research is very often black and white. That's how we get concrete hypotheses and theories and solutions. But everyone in healthcare talks about we want more adherence, we want more, we want to improve outcomes. And so much of that is we're trying to find better science, better medicine, but we need to just improve the experience because, like you just said, if somebody has a bad experience, then maybe they won't take the medication, not because they don't believe in the medication, not because the medication doesn't work, but because they're maybe a little bit confused, maybe they're just unhappy with the doctor and they just don't want to do it. That's so important.
Yeah.
It is so important in doing all of these things that actually can really be make or break for somebody's health outcomes, but we
Yeah.
just don't think about that enough.
Let's continue going in this direction. So imagine you have a magic wand. You're thinking about this problem as a designer, thinking creatively about it. What would you change? What would you move around, or what sort of things would you try to get us into a better place? Maybe not to perfection or a 100% end state, but to make things a little bit better.
Yeah, I think a big part of what I think ties together all of the work I do is, again, we're coming back to there's so many fragmented solutions, right? And I think a lot of times the industry of healthcare is very focused on themselves. They're focused on how can we make the next best solution. And then the people on the other side, the patients and the consumers, oftentimes feel like it is owed to them for things to be fixed, for the healthcare industry to be fixed. They want everything to be perfect. They want perfect solutions. But with the way that healthcare is right now, I don't believe, especially in America, I don't believe that either one is ever going to happen. It's like two people who never intend on like apologizing for something. Nobody's ever going to step up and be the bigger person. So
And
then
take responsibility.
yeah, nothing's ever going to happen. But
Interesting.
what really needs to happen is that we need to meet in the middle. So that's sort of how I see my work, and like my life's purpose is I'm working in healthcare on the industry to hopefully help bring those solutions a little bit closer to the people and the people's lives that they're living. Like, how can we not change the solution that we've built, but how can we slightly change the experience of how we deliver it to meet the way that people are living their lives right now, the way people are thinking, where their mindset is at? And then how can we help the patients and the consumers have the knowledge and have the empowerment and have like the self-efficacy to go out there and search for that and be empowered to try it out and to take that risk? Because I think a lot of people ask me how I get to the point where I've been at in my own personal health journey. And it's being empowered and knowing that I'm the one that is going to change my own life. Like, nobody else is going to do that for me. I used to go to doctor's offices being like, I'd have to wait 6 weeks for an appointment. I'd be counting down the days, being like, in 6 weeks, my problem will be solved. In 5 weeks, my problem will be solved. Tomorrow, my problem will be solved. My problem was never solved at the appointment. And then I was just disappointed and then I was upset. And the only person that can change that is myself. Learning not to be disappointed, learning to change my expectations. I'm not going to have my problem solved. My goal isn't to have my problem solved. My goal is to have a different next step, have some more information, have something else that I can then use to do something else, or whether that's going to appointments, having really thought through the information, having really thought through all the symptoms I've been having and map them out on a spreadsheet and come with patterns, come with my initial thoughts. And yeah, I understand not everybody is going to have the privilege to go to doctors that are willing to listen to them and that can do that. And that wasn't always my experience, but I'm very fortunate to have had that experience so many times. But I also know that they're not the ones that has to go and live with this. I am. So rightfully so, they're not going to be as invested as me. They're the ones with the knowledge and the expertise, and the ability to take action on a lot of these things. But I'm the person that knows it the best because I'm the one experiencing it. So it's my job to bring that information there.
Let me check my understanding on something that you just said. So if I'm following you, if somebody asks me, who is my healthcare provider? Is it fair to say the number one healthcare provider for me is me?
Yes. In the way that you're saying yes. I mean, we call healthcare providers doctors, but yes, I understand the sentiment of what you're saying. And yes, you are the only one that can truly take care of your health. Your doctor
Yes.
can give you a medication, but you got to take it.
Yeah, that I'm in the driver's seat on this thing. That just clicked for me because I'm thinking of, whether it's a healthcare related issue or something else. I think the thing that you're describing is something that a lot of people can relate to. That thing on the calendar that's 3 weeks from now, like I'm going to be happier when that day comes and I finally get to fill in the blank. Or I'm working on this thing now and it's been really challenging, but 2 weeks from now my schedule is going to clear up, everything's going to be a whole lot easier. You're offering a counter argument there that I find really helpful and healthy, is that there's a lot that can be done in the next 5 weeks, 4 weeks, if I recognize my own power in this situation. It could be to do something or to think a little bit differently about it.
Yeah. And I think we talked quite a bit about, how a lot of the work that you do is helping people like build systems to sort of reach some of their goals that they're wanting in whatever aspects of their life that there are. And I think, going into that example, a lot of it is about really understanding yourself and figuring out what you need and giving that to yourself. And I think in order to do that, you need to be open to it looking different than you expected. For me, I really try, and it's a very vulnerable thing to do, so I'm not going to say that this is easy, but one time I went to a doctor, I was having this very acute problem. I was very scared about it. And that fear did lead to some urgency of feeling like I need to solve this now, and that makes sense, and I'm not saying that that's invalid at all. But when I got to the urgent care, I realized, like, this doctor is not going to be able to solve my problem. He is not going to be able to tell me what's going on. Like, that's not his expertise, and it's going to take months for me to get into a specialist. And really going into, what do I need right now? Like, what is getting me to this point that makes me feel like my life is literally ending in this moment? And it was the anxiety of certain worries about some of the symptoms I was having and how dangerous that they were. So I sat down, and I said to the doctor, look, I understand that you might not be able to solve this problem right now, but what is making this so hard for me isn't actually the symptoms. Because he was like, well, your symptoms aren't actually as bad as you think they are. He wasn't trying to invalidate me. He was just genuinely saying, like, they're not dangerous, these symptoms. And I had to be very frank with myself and tell myself, like, these symptoms actually aren't that bad. What is making this feel really bad is how scared I am about what is happening and what could happen. And so I basically had a whole conversation with him, and I told him, look, I understand it's not that bad, and I am going to see a specialist about it, but what I need to feel comfortable leaving here right now and not feel like I need to go admit myself into the hospital because I'm too scared of what's going to happen with my symptoms is I need to know, like, if this happens, is this okay? If this happens again, what do I do about it? At what point does this become an emergency? At what point should I go to the hospital? At what point should I not? At what point is this, like, fine for me to keep going as long as I get it checked out eventually? It was all those questions and worries that I had that were making me feel like it was a much worse situation than it was. And that's not something somebody else can know. That's not something somebody else can give to you. And that's why when I was at the worst place I was with my health a couple of years ago, I felt the best about my life because I realized that what I needed so badly was control and consistency. And I understood that I wasn't going to get that with the way that my health was. Like, things were changing and I was reacting to new things and I was trying different medications, and that was out of my control. So I gave myself control by building systems and routines and habits in my life that were as simple as, like, waking up at a certain time every day, going to the gym in the morning, always going for a walk before I had breakfast, whether the walk was 1 mile because that's all I could do that day, or it was 3 miles, reading before I go to bed. It's these things that allow me to give myself that control because I realized that that is what I needed. That is what my brain needed. That's what my body needed. And I couldn't, it looked different to what I expected. I expected that to be in the other ways of my health, but I realized I wasn't going to get that. And that first step is probably the hardest, is realizing and admitting that you're not going to get it in that way and giving it to yourself in another way.
Jenna, thank you for sharing that. Folks listening just got a masterclass on how to speak to share your needs, to say out loud, here's what I need. I think that example that you gave is a really powerful one. So thank you for sharing that. You've mentioned change a couple of times in this conversation. You're a leader, and so I want to ask you directly, what advice would you give to other leaders out there listening, and they're navigating some version of change that is keeping them up at night? What's your advice to them?
I'd say change is an uncomfortable thing because you don't really know what's on the other side. And you hope that it's better, but you don't know for sure. And I heard this saying a couple months ago, and it was something along the lines of, like, a plane can't land on a crowded tarmac. And it's like, you have to make room for the new things that are going to happen. And those things are what you hope to be good things, but you have to get rid of the old things first. You can't keep them as a safety net, and you can't keep them just in case. And that's a really hard thing to do. And it's hard to protect yourself and try and get something new at the same time. And I think you need to just not be afraid. And I know that's some easier said than done. I'll be the first to admit that, so many of these mindset changes that have truly changed my life and have been like these tiny things that suddenly it's a tiny realization in the moment, but it has such a big change in my life. If you would have told me these things a year ago, it wouldn't have done anything because I wasn't necessarily ready to hear it. And just know that when if you put yourself in the right position, the things that need to happen will happen when it's the right time and when you're ready for that to happen.
Yeah. Beautiful. I love what you just said about readiness. And before that, if you want to get something new and protect yourself at the same time, it's hard to do both of those things. Thank you for sharing that. With the time that we got a little bit left, a handful of minutes. What have we not hit that you would like to talk about or go back to?
I think a big part of my goal with sharing my life on social media, um, and something that was unexpected to me is, at first, other people were telling me how seen they felt by my content, that they felt like there was this part of their life that they had to hide so much, or that people just didn't really understand, and how powerful it was to them that the content was making them feel so seen. And that's amazing, right? Like, that's truly amazing, and I'm so glad I can give that to people. But it took me about a year and a half, maybe even 2 years, to realize that I was getting the same from them, that I was feeling seen by them
Wow.
relating to me, and how much power that has. And I think that goes back to everything that I've been talking about, which is, in order to like get what you need in life, and to figure out what you need, and that's part of healing, right? Is figuring out what you need and figuring out how to get there, is understanding yourself. And in order to understand yourself, you have to truly see yourself. And I think even from ourselves, we can try and hide things, like I just said, to protect yourself. You don't want to admit something. Like I said, that example of going to urgent care, I didn't want to admit that so much of the way that I was feeling and that drastic nature of the situation came from my anxiety, just my fear. Nothing to do with the physical symptoms of what was happening. And I've had to acknowledge that with my health as well. It's like, so much of my symptoms and my reactions aren't actually that severe, but that there's this mental burden of how complicated it is, and how afraid it can be, and how fearful I can be of so many of these things, and how big of a burden that is. And I think for so long I tried not to admit that, because I felt like people in my life already don't understand the situation I'm in. Like, they probably won't understand even more the mental burden of it. But you actually never know until you share that, and people
Yeah.
people can't know what you need if you don't tell them. Again, we go back to communication, right?
Yeah.
Like, nobody will ever know that you need something if you don't tell them. They can't read your mind.
Can you say that again?
Yeah, people will never know what you need if you don't tell them. like like I think that's the best relationship advice too. Like, all my
Yeah.
friends that are in relationships, I'm like,
Hell yeah.
they're like, well, I wish he did this. Well, did he know you wanted that?
Yes.
Like, how? Like, you can't expect people to be married. It's like, look, don't get me wrong. It feels amazing when somebody does something and you didn't ask for it. Like, that makes you feel great. Like, they anticipated your need. They're doing something out of their thought. But at the same time, if you need something and you don't ask, they're not gonna know that you want
Yes.
that.
Yes. Yes.
It's really
Yes.
important.
Yes.
And the first step in that is seeing yourself and understanding what you need. Because if you don't know your needs, that just makes it worse, and it's just more frustrating for you as well.
That's a great point. That's a great point. And I'm in this conversation is helping me see the connection between, that expressing your needs is a healthy thing to do in all the ways that we've been talking about. And in order to, if I'm saying, Jenna, here's what I need to do the work on my end first to really clarify that. Um,
Exactly.
and that's not an easy thing to do.
No, and that's why, like, going back to the very beginning, healing is not a result. It is not an end point. It's not something we're getting to. It's a relationship with yourself. It's a relationship with your life. It's a relationship with the way that you live your life. And in that is, communicating your needs, communicating what is happening, whether that's with yourself, whether that's with other people, and having a healthy relationship with whatever is going on in your life. Like, I truly believe that the reason I'm able to be so positive and happy and content with where I'm at is that, like, I have a perfect relation. No, I won't say perfect. I have a very good relationship with whatever is happening in my life. And sometimes there's a lag in that. Sometimes something new happens and I feel a little catastrophic about it. And, oh no, this is the end of the world. But I have the coping mechanisms and I have the skills to get to a better place with that. And I'm always trust that I will get there. And that even if there's something new, I'll make it work. And I'll live my life the way that it is. And that is what healing is.
I love that definition. I've arrived at the end of our conversation with a new definition of healing and a renewed understanding of the importance of communicating needs. I want to ask you about takeaways. Anything come up for you? Any learnings for yourself because of the conversation that you and I got to have today?
Yeah, I think what you keep repeating, it's interesting because you keep repeating the importance of like expressing your needs. And even though I can definitely understand that I've said that a lot in many different ways, that's definitely one of the things I think I still struggle with, even myself. And it's like I'm saying this, but I think I sometimes find it hard to hear it. And so I think I'm actually not even hearing it myself when I'm saying it. So it's interesting that you keep saying it. And I think that's a takeaway for me as well, is again how important it is to understand your needs and express them in whatever way is fit for the situation.
I'm going to be replaying that moment, well, a number of moments, but especially that moment where you're talking about having doctor's appointments on the calendar. And but what that meant was you were taking yourself out of the process of healing, and really challenging yourself to think critically about, okay, it's a date on the calendar. That person's not going to fix me. What can I do now? What can I do to be well, healthy, happy now? In coaching, I talk about coaching is essentially, I think of it as two things: provoking awareness and then shifting behavior. And provoking awareness, think of, what am I not seeing? How can I look at this differently? What am I missing here? What am I not getting? And this conversation has been a great reminder for me, and just how valuable that can be. That space between the 0 and 1 of, I'm not seeing it, now I am seeing it, and I get to choose what I want to do. So thank you for sharing your time. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, Jenna. It's been a pleasure connecting in conversation with you.
Yeah, it's been amazing. Thank you so much for having me. I loved having this conversation.
How can folks, I know you said you're very active on the social media. Share more about that. How can folks connect with you, link up with what you're doing, and support or follow along with what you're building?
Yeah, so for everything really, LinkedIn, just my name. And then on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, like I said, I share about my personal health journey, some of the challenges I've been through, and really just like how I'm just living my life, and yeah, living my life as it is, in this way. And it's at Jenna X Health. So like my first name, the letter X Health, on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube.
Amazing. And anything coming up that folks should be looking forward to? I know that you're in a period of transition in your own life with school and everything. So what's coming down the pike that folks can anticipate?
Yeah, again, another thing haven't talked about because I do so many things, but I'm launching an app called Livio very soon. Very soon. Again, if you connect with me on any social media platform, I'm sure you'll be hearing about it. But the app is focused on helping people build habits to improve their health. You know, we truly believe like you don't need perfection to make progress, and so there's so much pressure in society to do that. And I believe people know what to do. They know they need to sleep more. They know they need to eat certain foods that are healthy. They know they need to get more movement. That's not the problem. We don't need to be telling people what to do. We need to be telling them and helping them do it, because that's not the problem. People know what to do. They just can't get themselves to do it and can't get themselves to keep doing it. And that goes back to a lot of what we've talked about, is like it's hard to get yourself to do something. It's hard to understand like what you're struggling with and how you can adjust that in order to get to the place you want to be and to act in the way that aligns with your desired life. And a lot of that has to do with habits, and we're building an app that will hopefully help people build those habits.
I can't wait to see what you end up building. This has been a healing conversation for me. Thank you, my friend. Thank you for sharing your time and your wisdom, Jenna. And folks listening, thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning into the Delta Podcast. If you're ready to lead through change, stay with us. Until next time, remember, it's always a great day to be coachable.